I was an atheist for 42 years, until the night I watched my daughter breathe her last breath, and then, just 3 days later, I saw her open her eyes again. Science had no explanation. But God did. Subscribe if you believe miracles still happen. Tell me where you're watching from, and please share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all. My name is Lisa Harrington. I've lived most of my life in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm a nurse, a wife, a mother, and for over 4 decades, a devout atheist. I didn't just not believe in God, I found the entire concept laughable. To me, faith was for the weak. For the ones who couldn't handle the truth. But this isn't just a story about losing my daughter. It's about losing my pride. My arrogance. And eventually, my unbelief. Emily, my only child, was everything to me. Smart, curious, 10 years old with a laugh that could brighten even the darkest morning. She was the kind of kid who still believed in fairy tales. I used to roll my eyes whenever she'd talk about angels or ask why we didn't pray. I told her the truth, or what I thought was the truth. There's no man in the sky, sweetie. Just science. Then came that day. A Saturday afternoon in late October. We were driving home from her dance recital. Emily was in the back seat, singing Taylor Swift songs off-key and giggling when she messed up the words. I remember turning my head to smile at her in the rearview mirror. That's when the truck hit us. I didn't even see it coming. All I remember was the sound of metal crushing, my head slamming into the steering wheel, and Emily's scream. When I came to, the paramedics were pulling me out. Emily wasn't screaming anymore. She wasn't moving. At the hospital, the words came like knives: traumatic brain injury, comatose, minimal brain activity, uncertain prognosis. I kept nodding, like I was hearing someone else's story. But it was mine. My little girl was lying in a hospital bed, her tiny chest hooked up to machines, her head wrapped in gauze, her eyes closed. She looked peaceful, like she was sleeping. But they told me she might never wake up. I didn't cry right away. I went numb. I clung to the facts, to the percentages, to the medical charts. That's what I knew, science. That's what I trusted. But at 3 a.m., when the hallway was quiet and the smell of disinfectant filled my nose, I sat next to her and whispered, "Please, wake up." No one heard me. Not even Emily. 3 days passed. Her vitals dropped. Doctors started preparing us for what they called the discussion. The one where we'd talk about life support. Tom, my husband, was always a quiet man. He believed in God, but he never forced it on me. That night, he held my hand and said, "Maybe it's time to pray." I pulled my hand away. "No," I snapped. "Don't you dare bring your imaginary friend into this." He didn't respond. He just sat by her bed and started praying anyway. Then came Pastor Donna. I didn't want her there. I thought the hospital had crossed some line. She came in with her soft voice and Bible in her lap and asked if she could pray for Emily. I told her no. She just smiled and said, "I'll be in the chapel, every day at noon." I thought she was ridiculous. I hated how calm she was. But something strange started happening. The 4th night, a monitor in Emily's room beeped louder than usual. The nurses came in, adjusted something, and left. Then the lights flickered. Just a little. I assumed it was a wiring issue. I brushed it off. Until the 5th night. I'd fallen asleep with my head on Emily's bed when I heard a whisper. At first, I thought it was a nurse. But when I looked up, the room was empty. Completely silent. Then I heard it again. A girl's voice, faint but clear. "Mommy." I sat up so fast I knocked over the chair. Emily was still unconscious. Nothing had changed. I stared at her, trembling, questioning everything. Was I hallucinating? Sleep deprived? Losing my mind? Later that day, Nurse Jackson came in. We used to work together years ago. She didn't say much, just held my hand, looked at Emily, and said, "Don't give up. God's not done yet." I didn't respond. But her words echoed in my mind the rest of the day. I found myself walking past the hospital chapel that afternoon. I peeked inside. Pastor Donna was alone, kneeling. She looked up and smiled when she saw me. I turned and walked away. But something kept pulling me back. A force I didn't understand. I spent that night staring at Emily's face. Her skin had turned pale. The machines beeped rhythmically. A storm rolled in, and thunder cracked through the sky. That's when I said it. Out loud. God, if you're real, prove it. Bring her back. I don't care what it takes. No lightning. No voices. Just silence. But deep inside, I felt something shift. I didn't know it then. But I'd just cracked the first layer of my unbelief. And something, or someone, was listening. The next morning, something was different. The hospital room felt lighter. Not physically, but in the air. I can't quite explain it. It was like walking into a place where someone had just opened all the windows after a long time. The scent of antiseptic was still there, but it was overpowered by something softer. Something peaceful. I stayed silent about my prayer from the night before. I still wasn't sure if I had actually meant it. Or if it even counted. It didn't sound like the kind of prayer religious people would say. But I had said it. And deep down, I knew I had meant every single word. Emily hadn't moved. She still looked like she was asleep. But the monitors showed a small change in her brain activity. Very small. Barely noticeable. But it was there. The doctor brushed it off as normal fluctuations. But I saw the look on his face, he was surprised. Later that day, Tom came in with 2 cups of coffee. He didn't say much. We sat in silence, watching our daughter's chest rise and fall with the help of machines. Then he reached into his bag and pulled out a small, leather Bible. He placed it on the side table, not forcing it into my hands. Just setting it there. A gesture. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. That evening, I stood alone in the hallway outside the ICU. It was raining again, tapping against the window like impatient fingers. I looked down at the chapel again. The door was open. This time, I walked in. Pastor Donna was lighting a candle. She didn't seem surprised to see me. She just offered a quiet smile, then went back to her seat. I didn't speak to her. I just stood in the back. I didn't know what I was doing. Or why I was there. But I sat down. And I cried. Not the quiet kind of crying either. The kind that comes from somewhere so deep it feels like your ribs are breaking. I cried for Emily. I cried for every time I mocked people of faith. I cried because I was terrified. And because I didn't know what else to do. When I got back to the room, I didn't expect anything to have changed. But something had. Nurse Jackson looked up at me and said, she twitched. I blinked. What do you mean? Her hand. Just a small movement. Could be a reflex, but I've been here long enough to know it wasn't that. I walked over to the bed and took Emily's small hand in mine. It was warm. Still. But warm. I leaned down and whispered, "Mommy's here." No response. I didn't expect one. But later that night, after Tom had gone home to shower, after the nurses dimmed the lights, after the machines settled into their regular beeping rhythm, I saw it. Emily's finger twitched. I froze. "Do it again," I whispered. Nothing. Then, another twitch. And this time, her lips parted slightly. Like she was trying to say something. I called the nurse. They checked her again, marked it as involuntary. But I knew. I just knew. Something was happening. That night, I had a dream. And it was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. In the dream, I was standing in a vast white space. Not a room. Not heaven. Just space. All white. Peaceful. Emily was there, too. She was wearing her recital dress, the pink one with sparkles she loved so much. She smiled at me and said, "I'm not alone, Mommy. He's here." I didn't understand. "Who's here?" I asked. Then a voice. Not hers. Not mine. Deep. Gentle. But strong. "She will return. But you must believe." I woke up drenched in sweat. My heart was pounding. Was it just my subconscious? My grief? Or was it more? The following day, I opened the Bible Tom had left. I didn't know where to start. So I flipped through randomly and landed on the book of John. My eyes caught one line. "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." I closed the book. I didn't believe yet. Not fully. But I wanted to. For the first time in my life, I wanted to believe. More changes came quickly after that. Emily's brain scans showed unexpected improvement. Her swelling decreased. Her heartbeat grew steadier. The doctors were baffled. They called it unexplained recovery markers. But I had another word for it. A whisper. God wasn't shouting at me. He wasn't sending burning bushes or parting waters. He was whispering. Nudging. Drawing me closer. One evening, as I watched the sunset through the hospital window, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks: hope. Not scientific optimism. Hope. Tom came in later and found me praying silently. He didn't interrupt. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just sat beside me. And held my hand. That night, for the first time, I prayed without anger. Without sarcasm. I didn't ask for proof. I just said, "Thank you." It was small. But it was real. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But I knew something was happening. And it was bigger than me. It was a Tuesday morning. The kind of morning no one remembers: ordinary, quiet, cloudy. Nurses walked back and forth with clipboards, machines beeped in rhythm, and coffee steamed gently in styrofoam cups. Nothing about that day screamed miracle. But for me, it became the day everything changed. I had been reading the Bible Tom left behind for the past week. Not all of it, just little pieces. A verse here, a story there. I didn't understand most of it, but something about the words calmed me. They gave me something to hold on to when everything else felt like water slipping through my fingers. That morning, I held Emily's hand like I always did. Her fingers were still, but no longer cold. The doctors now admitted her body was improving faster than they anticipated. Still, they warned us, progress doesn't mean she'll wake up. Sometimes, comas last longer than expected, even indefinitely. I hated that word. Indefinitely. As I sat beside her, watching her tiny chest rise and fall, I whispered again, "It's Mommy, baby girl. I'm here. I'll always be here." And then, she moved. Not a twitch. Not a spasm. Emily's head turned, slowly, like she was responding to my voice. Her eyelids fluttered, as if fighting through layers of sleep. I gasped. I stood up so quickly my chair nearly fell back. "Emily?" I whispered. "Emily, can you hear me?" Her eyes, those beautiful hazel eyes, opened. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling. Then they moved toward me. And she smiled. A slow, weak, but unmistakable smile. I collapsed into the chair, covering my mouth. My heart was racing so loud I could barely hear the nurses rush in behind me. "She's awake," one of them shouted. Doctors stormed the room. Machines buzzed. Questions filled the air. But I didn't move. I just kept holding her hand. The doctors examined her, ran tests, asked her to squeeze their fingers. She could. They asked her to blink. She did. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible, but she managed to say 2 words before she fell asleep again. "Hi, Mommy." That was it. 2 words that shattered everything I thought I knew. Tom arrived not long after. He dropped his coffee when he saw the monitor showing a different pattern, awake brain activity. When the nurse told him, "Your daughter's awake," he just stood there, frozen, blinking back tears. For a long time, we didn't speak. We didn't need to. We just sat beside Emily, watching her sleep, whispering silent prayers, me, an ex-atheist still learning what faith even looked like. The next few days were a blur of recovery. Emily's speech was slow, her movements even slower, but the doctors were stunned. They had no explanation. "Her recovery is unusual," one of them admitted. "We'll need to run more tests." But I didn't care. I had already seen what I needed. Emily was back. Alive. Breathing. Smiling. And with her return came something else, a shift inside me. For years, I'd lived under the weight of certainty. I believed in science, reason, and facts. I mocked those who believed in things they couldn't see. I was loud about it, too. Arrogant. Dismissive. But now, I was the one clinging to something unseen. Not because I needed to feel better. But because it was real. God had whispered into my storm. Not with thunder, but with grace. And he did it through my daughter, through a child who had no voice, yet somehow spoke louder than anything I'd ever heard. It didn't mean everything was perfect. Faith didn't erase my doubts overnight. I still wrestled. I still asked questions. But now, I asked them with God, not against him. I eventually returned to the chapel. Pastor Donna saw me and simply nodded. She didn't preach. She didn't need to. That Sunday, I sat through a church service for the first time in over 30 years. Tom held my hand the entire time. I didn't sing the songs. I didn't know the prayers. But when the pastor spoke about Lazarus, the man Jesus raised from the dead, I cried. Because I had seen my own miracle. Not just Emily waking up. But me. A woman who once mocked faith, now finding peace in a place she once avoided like the plague. And here's the strangest part. Emily remembers something. Not much. But one night, weeks later, she asked me, "Mommy, who was the man with the shiny robe that held my hand?" I blinked. "What do you mean?" She shrugged sleepily. "He said not to be scared. He said you were coming. He smelled like sunshine." She doesn't bring it up often. But every time she does, I remember that dream. The whisper in the white space. The voice that said, "She will return. But you must believe." I believe now. Not because someone forced me. Not because I needed hope to survive. But because I saw my daughter rise. And in that moment, I saw God. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever doubted, questioned, or walked away from faith, I understand. I've been there. But I want you to know, sometimes, it's in our darkest hour that light shows up. And sometimes, it shows up through the eyes of a child. Let me know in the comments, have you ever experienced something that made you question everything you thought you believed? I'd love to hear your story. And if you haven't yet, don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more real stories that speak to the soul. God bless you.